Juggling motherhood and modern day life can be stressful and relentless, but it doesn't need to be this way. The Joy of Being podcast is the answer to maternal mental health, bringing sustainable relief and calm to hardworking mums everywhere so that you, your family and work can thrive. My name's Marina Pearson and I'm your host, transformational coach and mum who loves to interview business owners, transformational professionals and creatives to have insightful conversations about what it takes to really live a life that is thriving, fulfilling and full of joy. So in the next coming weeks, I have decided to launch a coronavirus series in which I'll be bringing on amazing guests to talk about these uncertain times and how even in uncertainty, there can be an amazing opportunity for us to thrive. Now, that may sound weird, especially if you're seeing markets tumble, especially if you've got people around you that are suffering because of the virus, and maybe even if because you are scared of your business coming to a halt. Whatever it is, the fears that you have and the panic that you may be feeling, then this series is going to really help with that. I felt really compelled to bring this into my awareness, but also into the awareness of you, the listener. So with that in mind, I'm super excited to be launching this series and for us to create a different conversation to the one that's being had in the media. Not to say that this isn't important, not to say that we're not entering into difficult times, but to say that there is and there are other ways of viewing it other than the panic and the fear that's being brought to the table. So if you are feeling that and you are being affected by the coronavirus through your business, through your finances, through your health, then these are going to be incredible conversations to be tuning into. And if you know of anybody in that situation, then please do share the episodes with them. Enjoy. And on today's show, I have the magnanimous functional medicine doctor, Dave Hompes. Dave is actually somebody that I've worked with personally, and thankfully I did. I had all of these symptoms that during my time with Leo when he was first born, getting in the way of me being the mum that I really wanted to be. I couldn't be there for him 100% of the time because I wasn't feeling well at all. And it was very frustrating for me because I know as a mum that that's what we want. That's our number one thing, is to be there for our kids in a way when we are being the best version of ourselves. But when we're sick, tired, frazzled, I know for a fact that that's a really difficult endeavor. We're shorter with them, we snap at them, and. So I thought this would be a really, really important conversation to be having, especially at this moment in time. So we talked about what chronic actually disease is. We talked about how when we have symptoms in the body, they're not something to be afraid of. They're something to actually listen to. We talked about how we finally need to take responsibility for our bodies and why we don't, and what's behind that, and also why we need to, and the benefits, of course, of that too. So if you are struggling with anything chronic, such as IBS, such as migraines, such as fibromyalgia, such as chronic fatigue, or anything of that nature and ilk, then this is going to be an amazing episode for you. Enjoy. So welcome everybody to another amazing episode of The Joy of Being. And on today's show, I have the amazing Dave Hompes, and I am super excited to have him on here today. I've worked with Dave personally when I was going through a bit of a health tsunami. And I'm really glad I did. He's somebody that if I want to understand something around immune system, viruses, parasites, stuff like that, he's the person that I would want to go and ask, because he's actually written books on it. He's passionate about it. And obviously he's a functional medicine doctor, so he understands what's going on. So finally, after 2 years, I've actually got him on here. So welcome.
Thank you, Marina. It has been 2 years and stops and starts and promises and promises.
Yes, but you're here now, finally. And at a very good time, perfect timing, of course, based on what's going on in the world. So yeah. I really wanted to bring him on to give him the limelight in terms of his own, how he's seeing all of this, in terms of immunity, in terms of vaccinations, in terms of all of that wonderful stuff. Because for any of you that have been listening, you've either seen the media, where vaccinations are going to possibly be mandatory, but also other conspiracy theories that are going out. So I just really wanted to sort of have a grounded conversation with Dave around this, that would spark, hopefully, a little bit of hope and a feeling of well-being by the end of this conversation. So welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. Suppose I should start by maybe just giving a bit of background. That'd be
go for it.
Who the hell am I, and why on earth am I on here? My background was originally in sports science. That's what I studied up to master's level at uni back in the late 90s. And then I took an interest in helping people with exercise. So I was a gym instructor and then a personal trainer. But my personal training education was very holistic. We did a lot of work in nutrition, spirituality, making sure that people's bodies were sufficiently robust to do exercise in the first place so that the exercise was beneficial to them and not detrimental. So I learned a lot about how the human body works and how the different systems in the body all interact. And then from about 2002 onwards, I worked as a nutritional coach along with the personal training. I had a holiday in Egypt in 2004 when I had food poisoning. And I ended up with a pretty significant problem in my digestive system at that time. And it never, even though it sort of the acute symptoms improved when I got home, it never really resolved fully. There was one of those sort of moments of I never quite felt the same after I'd had that food poisoning incident in Egypt. And then I had a period of stress, very important, area in any discussion on health, and had some financial problems because I screwed up my first business. And then my mum died suddenly in 2007. And there was a period of pretty significant stress, and all the really severe symptoms came back. So I had a lot of heartburn and acid reflux, bloating, lots of weird changes in bowel movements, abdominal cramps, feeling anxious one day, depressed the next day, irritable and angry in between all those emotions, tired during the day, wide awake at night, couldn't sleep very well, dandruff, low sex drive, a whole cluster of different symptoms. And the skills that I'd learned weren't sufficient to resolve those symptoms. So no matter what I do with my diet and no matter what I do with my exercise regimen, nothing really improved those symptoms. So I contacted a functional medicine doctor in California. His name's Dr. Dan Kalish. And Dan helped me overcome those symptoms. And it just so happened that he had created his own training program. And I was enrolled on the inaugural training program of something called the Kalish method back in 2007, 2008. And so I learned how to help other people in the way that I helped myself. So how did I help myself? Well, I did a stool test, just provided a stool sample, sent it to a lab in the US, and found out that I had a stomach infection called Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori for short. And this little sucker can create inflammation in the stomach. It's famous for causing stomach ulcers, and it's even associated with a higher risk of developing stomach cancer if it hangs around in there for an extended period of time. So I took some herbs and knocked the H. pylori out and felt immediately better, within 30 days, significantly better. When I ran another stool test to check that the H. pylori had gone, it had been eradicated, but I also had a parasite and a mold overgrowth with something called aspergillus. So I took another set of herbs over about 60 days and found out that all the other symptoms in my digestive system cleared up as a result of that. Now, at the same time, doing that work, my moods improved, my energy improved, my skin improved, my sex drive came back. So just by working on my digestive system, I was able to restore, more or less full function over a period of several months in my entire body. And that's what really got me inspired to learn how to help other people doing that. So I basically then started to work with lots of clients in the functional medicine arena, learning all the time, doing more and more courses and keeping up to date and what have you. And then in 2012, I had another epiphany where I had a couple of clients who did quite well using nutrition and functional medicine, but it was only when we delved into their lives and started looking at stress and started looking at their psychology that they got really well. Cut a long story short, one lady was living a life to please other people and not giving herself any time. And when we did a little bit of just life coaching, really, rearranged her life for her, all her symptoms went away. It was incredible. And then another lady around the same time was in a dead-end relationship with her husband. They'd been married a long, long time, but it had fizzled out into a friendship, sort of a platonic relationship rather than a true husband and wife type relationship. And she left him amicably and went home and lived back where she grew up, closer to her family and some of her other friends. And all her symptoms went away. And I thought, geez, there's something more going on here than just biochemistry, nutrients, infections, toxins, and things. That's an important part. But then I became a lot more holistically minded when I realized that the mind had a significant role to play. And that was cemented in 2013 at a training course, 2014 actually, in a training course in South Africa, where I met a guy who used to have multiple sclerosis,
wow.
which is a supposedly incurable disease, who I sat with and just introduced myself, and we had a good chat. He said, I used to have multiple sclerosis. And I said to him, well, what did you do? Did you have a gluten-free diet? Did you detox? Was it mercury toxicity, lead, pesticides? What was going on? And he said, and he looked at me as if I was a lunatic and said, I didn't do any of that. He said, I came to a seminar. I learned a lot of things about my psychology and my relationships. I was almost wheeled in a wheelchair. I was able to walk out 2 days later, and within a week, pretty much all of the multiple sclerosis had disappeared, and the doctors couldn't find any trace of it. And I was totally blown away. It was a bit of if I'm allowed to swear, it was a bit of a head fuck for me, because my whole model of health had to now incorporate the mind-body connection as well as the physiology, the nutrition, and all of these different things. So I've been on a crusade ever since then to create an integrated model that looks at the biochemistry of the body, the nutrition, the functional medicine, and integrating the elements of the mind and the psychology with that as well. So going back after that background to the question you asked and the introduction you gave, how does all of that potentially relate to the current situation? I guess we could go in all sorts of directions at this point. But I think my biggest observation at the moment with the current COVID-19 issue, where my main area of interest lies, is the fact that I think that it's been blown out of all proportion. The statistics in the end, in 6 months' time, will tell us how many people had COVID and how many died, versus some of the other serious flu seasons that we've had in the past, like 2009. I think it's the N1H1 or H1N1. I can't remember which way around. 600,000 people under 65 died in 2009 as a result of that swine flu. So far, we're probably going to end up with similar numbers, maybe a little bit higher as the year progresses. But in 2009, we didn't have a lockdown. Now we've had a crazy lockdown, and there could be lots of consequences with that. Now, it's interesting, and I suppose everybody has seen on the news that the main narrative is that this virus is a killer virus. It's really serious. It's a really nasty strain. We have to run away from it and hide in our homes and bunkers, not talking to each other or touching each other, totally isolating ourselves, because otherwise millions of people are going to die. The original projection was that up to 500,000 people in the UK, 2 million plus people in the US were at risk of dying as a result of this virus. What's coming out now is that those statistics are wildly overinflated. And what we're seeing, of course, as many people realize, is the people who are having serious infections and dying are people who already have chronic health complaints for the most part. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. No, we don't want anybody to die unnecessarily. But where I come in, and with my mindset and my view, if you have an existing chronic condition with your lungs, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, which seem to be the conditions that are most prone to having a serious case of coronavirus, then you've probably been doing things all the way through your life that haven't been particularly supportive of your general level of health and wellness. With all the technology, the knowledge, the expertise we have these days, there's actually no real reason why anybody should end up with type 2 diabetes, or anybody should really end up with high blood pressure. We know how to completely control and manage those conditions before they even develop, just by using common sense, nutrition, and all of these different things. So it's a challenging scenario when people like you and me, Marina, and maybe people listening to the podcast who have a high value on their own health, do not really fear the virus. But people who are subordinate to the medical system, who've never been educated in how to look after themselves properly, are very fearful of the virus. We have this evil virus that's going to come and kill us. We have to separate ourselves from everybody else to save our lives. Whereas people who understand health and understand how the body works and understand how it interacts with microorganisms realize that if we have a nice, strong, robust immune system, the likelihood of us getting a serious case of COVID is very low. And we might get a cough for a couple of days, and it'll be gone. And we'll have probably some resistance to that for the future as well, because we've been exposed to it. So we have two sides, really, in this argument. I can understand why the government has locked everything down, because the vast majority of people do genuinely believe in the germ theory. The germ theory states that we are pretty much innocent, helpless victims, and microorganisms are going to come at us from all angles, for as long as we live on Earth, and they're going to threaten our health. And in order to combat that, we need antibiotics and we need vaccinations. So there's a lot of people who have that mindset because nobody has ever shared with them that there's another side to the argument. We were saying just recently that when we're very little, we're not taught how to look after ourselves and make our bodies and minds robust. We are taught that when we're ill, we need the doctor and we need the medical system. So the conditioning is that we are helpless, we need the medical system. They are the rulers of our health, of our body, and we are helpless. We need the doctor to look down on us from the ivory tower and tell us what to do in an authoritarian way. The other side of the argument is, if you do all the necessary things in your own body and keep it robust, you will have much lower chance of having a health problem with some kind of infection, whether that's a common cold on a year-by-year basis, or whether it's a more nasty, virulent strain of, say, COVID or any other virus that might come along. So there are two sides to the argument, and it's frustrating because it's very difficult from studying physiology and health for 20 plus years, 25 years if you include my degree, to see so many people panicking about this, because I don't think we should be panicking. We shouldn't be scared of these microorganisms if we look after ourselves. But the problem is most people don't look after themselves because they're never taught how to. It's not their fault necessarily. So I'm here to say, look, if you want to transcend the fear around all of this, and you want to take control of your own health and your own mind and your own body and have it all working in a nice, integrative, healthy unit, there are a lot of things you can do, both in a very simple way and in a little bit more of an in-depth way, to make sure that you're, I wouldn't say 100% bulletproof, because there's always a risk of developing a problem in your health with an infection. There's no doubt about that. But yet, playing the percentage game, you have a much, much lower risk of developing a problem with any virus now or even in the future if you take the steps that you need to take to make your system robust. I think that's the most important take-home point. But the challenge is, if you're running the government wherever you are, Germany, Sweden, UK, US, Canada, Australia, wherever you are, you've got to make decisions about the whole population. And so I can see why there's been a lockdown, no question about it. But the statistics that are coming out now show that people were wildly overinflating the estimates of how serious this was going to be. And a lot of panic set in. And there's a reasonable argument, a reasonable case to suggest that what's going on in the economy, in the business world, will have a longer lasting and greater impact on people's health than the virus ever will. And I think that's one of the problems that is being vastly overlooked. We've seen Virgin Atlantic are already looking to cut 3,000 jobs and not fly out of Gatwick Airport anymore. TUI this morning in the news said that they were probably going to offload about 7,000 jobs. Carluccio is one of my favorite little cafes where I had 2 or 3 really good friends who work there. they are pretty much in administration and bust and probably won't exist when this is all over. And that's just the start. Now, what's the knock-on effect of all of that, right? We don't know. So what we're doing here is we're saving people from, or supposedly saving people from, a virus by locking down the economy and isolating each other, while letting the whole system basically go to shit. And the end result of all of the economic strife could be far worse than the virus would ever be if it was left to run its course. Does that all make sense so far?
Absolutely. And what I'm really hearing in all of this is that it's really about deepening our understanding of how the body works and taking responsibility of that, taking responsibility and waking up to how things actually really work versus how we think they've been working, and questioning it. I speak to a lot of mums who have symptoms, and so they don't have symptoms of the coronavirus, but they just have symptoms of other things like migraines or IBS or, pains in the body, whatever. And there's an element of I go to the doctor, so that's kind of sorted. And yet there's a sense of denial that happens where it's like, I don't want to have a look at that. That's not something that I particularly want to have a look at. So, but I trust that they know more than I do. So we go into this dynamic of, I don't trust my body. I don't trust myself with the body that I have. So I'm going to give my power away to somebody else who I think knows better than I do what's going on, even though they don't live in my body, based on a symptom. Mm-hmm. So we're being treated for symptoms, but we're not treated for the cause or what the root of that is. So we all kind of have an idea that when we do have symptoms that they're kind of stress related. But it's easier to go to a pharmacy and pick up a pill and go home and take it and be done with it, versus actually going, well, I need to look at this. Why does this keep happening? What is there in what am I doing to create this? Because that's really scary in a lot of ways to think, oh my God, I'm creating this. But the good news is, and this is the really hopeful thing that I'm really hearing from you, is that we can do something about it. Like we can take
Absolutely.
that into our own hands and actually explore this. And, so yes, that's what I'm hearing.
You and I both know from our own health journeys. I just sort of described mine very briefly a few moments ago, and you and I working together to help you overcome some of the challenges that you had as well. It's easy to look around and talk to your friends and family members and colleagues and people like that and assume that it's normal to have those symptoms, or it's normal to have some digestive problems. It's normal to have headaches or migraines. It's normal to have weight management problems. It's normal to have a few skin issues or feel a bit tired or whatever it might be. But is it normal? Is it really normal? Well, it probably is. If you look at it from one perspective, it's normal for an unwell population to have those symptoms, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so if we're not careful, we get complacent and believe, because so many people seem to have these subtle health conditions, they're not necessarily ill enough to be labeled with a medical disease, so to speak, but there's a cluster of symptoms, sort of could be all sorts of different symptoms in different areas of the body that all seem to happen pretty much at the same time, day in, day out. It's not normal to feel that way. You don't have to feel that way. But what those symptoms are and the way that you frame them and perceive them is really important. And you and I have had quite a lot of discussion on this. If you see them as being just a part of life and you're helpless to do anything about them, that's fine, but you're probably not going to get very far with that outlook. If you see them as messages from your body to your conscious mind, suggesting that you might need to just take a step back and look at something you're doing in life or something you're not doing. What are you doing in life that you shouldn't be doing? We all know that there's things, what are you not doing that you should be doing? Simple, open-ended questions like that, you can start to understand what might be going on a little bit. The analogy that I like to use is that if you are driving down the motorway and some of your dashboard lights start flashing and it looks like there's something wrong on the dashboard, when you take the car in to see the mechanic the next day, you're not going to ask the mechanic to just fix the dashboard lights. You really want the mechanic to go under the hood, into the engine, into the electrics, into the chassis, wherever you might feel there might be a problem. And you want the mechanic to do a really good job of figuring out what's going wrong with the car, because ultimately your life depends on the car not being terribly faulty. It's not good to drive a faulty car around because all sorts of nasty things could happen that could endanger you and other people. But when we have symptoms, a lot of the time what we do, imagining the symptoms of the dashboard lights, we go to the doctor and we want a drug or some kind of treatment to take in a very simplistic and easy way with minimal disruption to our lives that puts the dashboard light out without actually going under the hood and exploring what's going on with the car to make the dashboard lights come on in the first place. So the drugs are really there to suppress the symptoms. And what we can do, and we have the ability to do these days with all sorts of tools and techniques, not just the work I do, but there are many ways we can approach this, is to look under the hood and look at the electrics and look at the chassis and actually figure out, so why is it that these symptoms are here? What is it that I am doing or I'm not doing that are causing the symptoms to appear? Is it something I'm eating? Do I have nutritional deficiencies? Do I have chronic infections living in my digestive system or imbalances in the microbiome? Do I have some toxins in there that are causing problems? Are my hormones out of balance? And you could then stop and ask, well, why have those issues developed? Is it due to stress? Am I not eating properly because of work stress or financial stress or whatever? So we keep asking why, and going backwards and along that chain of cause and effect. And we ultimately figure out what it is that's going on in our bodies and our minds that is really underlying the problem. And in some people, it can be a psychological issue that underpins everything. And in other people, it can be a biochemical issue. In another person, it might actually be a structural issue. Osteopaths and chiropractors work on the structure and the mechanics of the body. So if you think of a little triangle, each point of the triangle represents one sort of area of investigation that you can look at. You've got your structure and mechanics. You have, on another point of the triangle, you have your biochemistry and your nutrition and your toxins and things. And then on the other point of the triangle, you have your mental, emotional, spiritual, or psychological wellness. And they all interact with each other. And sometimes one issue in one corner of the triangle is the overriding issue. And in others, it can be just a little even spread of issues throughout the 3 points. Everybody's pattern is different. Everybody's journey towards health and wellness is different. I think what my frustration is that so few people seem to know what's really, truly available to them in order to look under the hood and figure out what's going on. Because it doesn't matter whether you have even a medically recognized disease. It's not necessary that you should carry on with that disease. There's always a way out of the illness pattern that you're in. And so first job, on these sorts of interviews and podcasts is please understand, everybody, that there are some unbelievably cool tools available to figure out why you're not feeling well if you want to engage in them and use them.
One thing that I really heard in what you're saying, and I think this is something that what I see is often we just think the way that we feel is just we have to put up with it. That's how it's been. That's how it will be. And I can deal with how things are right now. And I'll just go on just surviving, existing, because I can't even begin to fathom what living another way would actually even look like. It's a bit like the analogy of the frog. I know it's so personal development and it's a bit cheesy, but you put a frog and you turn up the heat in boiling water and it doesn't jump out and it dies. Because the environment in and of itself, it's small increments. But then if a frog jumps into boiling water, it will jump out. Put a frog in, it will jump out because it's just like, no, I don't want to be in this environment. This is not a good environment. There's contrast, right? There's contrast. And one of the things that I find with my clients is that they've never had anything to contrast it with, right? So why would they ever think that there's anything other than what their reality is? It's only when they begin to realize that there is a contrast that they're like, whoa, I've been putting up with that.
Yeah.
Never am I going to do that again. Like, that doesn't make sense to me anymore. How many years was I putting up with this? Wow. And I know, because I've been on the other side, and I get your frustration. I totally get it, because I know what's available. I know what's available. And I'm like, no, come on the journey. I know what's available. It's pretty awesome. And they're just going, no, money, I can't do it because of the money. I can't do it because of the money. And it looks really real to them. And I get it. Like, I've been there myself. In fact, I've just been through this process. And in fact, I probably went through the process with you going, I can't do this. It's too much money. And then I was like, how can I not do it? Where do I think I'm going to end up if I don't do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that is where it needs to go. Like, where do I think I'm going to end up if I just carry on the way I am and stop getting myself in under denial? So I hired a posture coach. Now, this is weird and wonderful. Never in a month of Sundays did I ever think I would do that. But I had my back went out 2 months ago. I couldn't move. I couldn't even stand up straight. Now, this is weird for me because I just had an assumption that, oh, yeah, my back's fine. I do yoga. It's great. I'm healthy. Well, no. What? For years, I've been going to massages. I've been doing yoga. But so I reached out to my friend and I said, look, this has been going on. Can you give me some exercises? And she goes, sure. And then I said, look, these seem to have been working. So is there anything else? Anyway, we had a chat. And what I realized was that the cost of saying no to her was actually far greater than me actually doing something about it. Now, what I didn't realize is my posture for years has been with my bum sticking out. And what this has done is that basically it's put a load of pressure on the bottom of my back. Mm-hmm. So I'm hyper flexible. So I don't notice because my body does amazing things. It's super flexible, but it adapted. So if I was going to carry on down that road 10 years from now, my back probably would have been like completely like screwed. So there's a moment of choice. We can lie to ourselves, which we do really well, by the way, and we believe our stories, and our busy mind does all sorts of creative and wonderful things to tell us why we shouldn't do something. Or we can get real and go, you know what? Enough. I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm not going to do this to myself. I'm not going to do it to the people around me anymore. My life force is worth so much more than me staying here and the fear I have to move through this. Anyway.
Yeah, and there are so many reasons. You raise really, really salient points. There are so many reasons why people end up with the underlying psychology all the way through from childhood up to now, and all the influences that people have had in life to actually then end up putting up with it. Even the religious teachings, because some of the religious teachings are based on the Stoic philosophy, which is you get what you're given, you've got to grin and bear it and just, get on with it and move through it. And
right.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. In the UK, stiff upper lip. Come on, we're tough. We can get through this.
I'm fine.
Exactly.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
No, you're not.
Comes through from all sorts of things in our environment at a young age and growing up that we are exposed to that we have no idea is actually driving our decision-making processes. Just going back to the finances, Marina, as well. When I was going through my process of getting well, I actually, I'd had a bankruptcy. And so I was skint. And this training course, this first functional medicine training course that I wanted to do was $5,000. And so I had to find a way, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. I wanted to be on that course more than anything. I did not have the funds, but I found a way. I didn't go stealing anything. Don't worry. I wasn't robbing banks, selling drugs or anything like that. What I did was I negotiated with my boss at the time to change the way that the payment structure worked so that it would give me the ability to pay for the course and end up being a win-win. And so when people say they can't afford it, that basically is always, in my experience, not 100% of the time, but oftentimes that's just a way of saying that it's not important enough for me to do yet.
Well, they don't see the cost. So
yes.
One of the things that I've really seen, and this has been a massive breakthrough for me in the last 24 hours, by the way, is that they don't actually the cost of staying is less painful to them than the cost of actually doing something.
Yeah.
But if they could see the cost of staying is actually going to cost them more than actually doing something about it, then there is a motive to move forward. And the thing is, I've seen too that any kind of I can't afford it piece, it's just objections are just fear in disguise. And that's all that's going on is the fear. And there are many fears around this.
Yeah, there are.
What happens if it doesn't work? What if I spend the money and I don't make the money back? There's a whole bunch of fears that show up.
For sure. There's also the fears of what other people are going to think as well. What's the husband going to think? Am I going to have to change what we feed the family? How difficult is it going to be? All of those things come in as well. And even the fear of finding out what's going on in one's body. I love doing lab tests and figuring out what's going on in my body, but some people are very reticent to do that. They genuinely do not want to know that they have a parasite, for example, because it's yucky. And they have a certain thought process around that, almost kind of like a phobia in many ways. I don't want to know whether I have H. pylori or fungal overgrowth in my digestive system or whatever it might be. Because it feels yucky and horrible and feel dirty and the shame attached to it sometimes and all of these different things. And then the fear of what they're going to have to change in their life in order to get to where they want to go. And that's all.
There are secondary benefits, aren't there, staying?
Yeah.
Where one is. I remember looking at that, and I remember it was actually a DiMartini event where there was a lady that, because he's just like relentless. He's like a dog with a bone. And I remember he was like, what is the secondary benefit to you? She goes, there is none. And he's like, no, there is a secondary benefit for you to stay where you are and to stay stuck and stay ill. No. Anyway, they discovered in the end, when she's actually like after an hour, because he's like, rah, 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 rah. That she was afraid that if she got well, that her husband would leave.
Relationships are huge. There's always a controlling dynamic, or often a controlling dynamic or not necessarily controlling, but there is a dynamic in relationships that changes when people have more or less energy. And there can be all sorts of weird and wonderful psychological elements. That's why I went deeply into the psychology of health, because the questions in my mind were things like, why does some people have a certain condition? Half of the people get well and half of the people don't get well. It can't possibly be the condition. It's not the condition that's causing that. It's the person who has the condition. What is it about the person that allows some people to get well and other people to not get well? Why do some people choose to take the steps to get well, whereas other people choose not to? And there's not saying that there's a right or wrong in this. What we're saying is that there's a psychological dynamic that underpins the decision-making around health without any question whatsoever. So there's a primary gain where there's a clear benefit to the person being unwell, which might be financial benefit that they get from the government, for example. I'm unwell, I get benefits. So if I get well again, I won't get those benefits anymore. And then in order to earn money, I'm going to actually go and have to do some work and do a job. And that's a primary benefit. Secondary benefits are maybe where there's a dynamic with somebody else. So if I get well, then my husband might leave. That's a classical one, or something similar to that. Then there's a tertiary benefit. The tertiary benefit is where you're involved with a healthcare practitioner, and that healthcare practitioner has it in his or her best interests that you don't get well. And that can be, that's controversial, but that's somebody who's, on a subscription system, giving you drugs every month and getting money from selling you the drugs. Could be a medical doctor, could be a psychiatrist, could be even a nutritionist selling supplements. the longer you're in their care, the more money they earn. So they have a vested interest not to dig into any other areas of your health or refer you to another practitioner. So there's primary, secondary, tertiary gains from people being unwell in the individual sort of space and also in the relationship space, whether that's in the family or whether it's with healthcare, whether it's in the wider picture of society. And all those things are really important, and people don't realize that they have them. DeMartini tells another really good story of a lady who had quite a lot of issues. She was in a wheelchair, very large cluster of symptoms. And he had her in his office one day, and he said he'd designed this beautiful health program for her. She was to come in and do these chiropractic adjustments. She was to do this with a diet. She was to take these supplements. And then she said, but Dr. DeMartini, you see that person out there in the waiting room? That's the lady who cares for me. And if I get well, I'm scared that I might lose her because she's the best friend and only friend that I have in the world.
Wow.
So it's more important for her to stay unwell than it is for her to get well, based on that real fear of loneliness. So there's always, most of the mind-body doctors I've spoken to, and these are medical doctors, these are not, airy-fairy people at all. These are medically trained doctors who integrate psychiatry or psychology into their work and human behavior. All of them have said to me that there's always a benefit to somebody with chronic illness without fail. There's always a benefit. Now, it can be quite difficult to unravel what that benefit is, but there always is. With me, when I was between 2004, after the food poisoning, and late 2007, when I found the H. pylori, the symptoms were there consistently, and they got worse due to the stressful year in 2007. But at any time, I knew the stool test was available to me. I knew I could have done that test, but I didn't do it. The reason I didn't do it is I was also living the life of Riley at that time in London, partying hard with my friends, great social life. So I knew, I only figured this out afterwards, but I knew unconsciously that if I needed to take the steps to get well, I'd have to forego all the things that I loved doing at that time that were really important to me in life. So I didn't do it. It was only when the symptoms became so bad that I was getting embarrassed in front of my clients and that I really couldn't function very well anymore, that I had to do something about it. And then after I'd taken the leap and done something about it and felt well again, I had the idea in my mind, the inspiration to set up a whole project on H. pylori. There was nothing on the internet at that time about H. pylori. I thought, there's a really cool opportunity. I can really be somebody and help a lot of people here instead of just having a few personal training clients. When that inspiration came in and I found a purpose in that and it became my mission, all of a sudden, the need to have the social validation disappeared completely. And I stopped doing all of those behaviors that I was doing previously that were keeping me feeling unwell. So there's another psychological element to health. What's the big reason you have for wanting or needing to be well? If you don't have that, then sometimes those lower values that come into your life rule your decision making. Whereas if you have that real big reason, I think for you at the time it was, I have a business. I have a business to run. My financial life depends on me being healthy and well. I can't sleep 4 or 5 hours a day and feel lousy. And I want to be a bloody great mum to my son. And if I'm feeling crap, I can't really be either of those. So if you hadn't had those big reasons to get well, let's say you were in a job in the city of London or something, commuting every day, you might not have had the inspiration to make those decisions to move forward. You may have done, but you may not. But the big things were the financial well-being and your son. Hugely.
It was really my son, actually, because I knew that if I can't look after me, who's going to be looking after him? And at the time, I was going through major upheaval in my relationship, and we split. So I knew it was just me and him. I had nobody to really lean on. And while I had somebody I could pay, I'm like, well, hang on a second. If I pay somebody to look after my son because I'm not feeling well, why can't I just redirect that money to pay me?
Yeah.
I invest in myself so I can look after my son instead of paying somebody else to look after him because I feel like crap. So just suddenly there was this unraveling of that makes no sense. Why would I invest? Why would I pay somebody money versus invest in me? And so it's not even spending money anymore. I mean, I've come to see this as, and I shared this in my group in a video, and I said, we spend money on things that don't really add value to our lives. They don't really add any value. I don't know, things, stuff. But when it comes to looking after ourselves, we get all caught up about that. And the biggest asset we've got is us. Like if we don't look after our asset, which is our mind, our body, our spirit, our health, what do we have? What do we actually have left? What have we got?
No amount of material possession is going to make you feel happy and well when your body and mind are eroding by the week.
Right. And so it took quite a while for me to really understand that. And I've learned from that now that that prevention is far better than actually dealing with the issue when it's arrived. And you're like, oh my God, like this is going to take ages. I've got to the point now where I can't even get out of bed. We put up with things, as I said. And so and it's also what I've come to see too, it's a level of how deserving we feel. So a lot of the mums that see me, they don't even feel deserving of that. Like they don't feel deserving of them to even look after themselves because they let the guilt take over. It's like, I've got to pay my family. Like this is real to me. And I get it. Like I've been there. I've so been there. And I also go, yeah. And what happens if you don't look after you? Is there going to be a family left for you to look after because you're going to be in bed really sick? So it's a conundrum really, because it is about waking people up to the truth of what they have right in front of them and for them to go look at what's actually happening versus letting some future take over your decision making. And a future that hasn't happened yet. And we have, and I get it, like I've been there, I'm sure you go there. And I have been in a lot of fear over these last few weeks regarding what's happening in the world and what the implications are to my son and the next generation. It worries me. But at the same time, I know that I am no good to anybody being in that space. Yeah. What I'm being asked for is to be grounded in love, and when needed to go back to my balance again. And so I sometimes we just need somebody to wake us up to that.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely spot on. The tendency to take health for granted. Everything really, don't we? Money and everything. Probably people were taking their jobs and their businesses for granted until all of this hit. If there's nothing else that benefit that we're going to get from the current situation, is to wake people up to what's really important in life. Why on earth did I spend all my money on that fancy holiday last year and these Gucci accessories that I'm carrying around and these fancy jewels and clothes when I wish I had that $2 or $3 grand in the bank now to help me through this really tricky situation, because actually these material possessions are useless now to me in this regard. I can sell them for a fraction of what I purchased them for and earn some money from them. Same with health, and nobody wants anybody to die unnecessarily. But we've got to understand that the people who are dying predominantly from COVID-19 are people who clearly haven't looked after their health. No fault of their own, right? So we're not blaming them for that. But we're seeing the consequences in the whole population of when people don't look after themselves. If everybody was healthy and robust, which I realize is utopian and probably largely unrealistic, but if we did have that utopian society where everybody was robust and healthy, we wouldn't need to lock anything down because we wouldn't fear the virus. So there's a whole lot of dynamics involved there. We have to take that aside and look at our own lives and our own bodies, our own minds, and say, what can I do to make sure that I'm robust and that my family is robust while all of this chaos reigns around us? Because you can never control what's going on outside in your environment. You can just control your perceptions, beliefs, thoughts, and actions largely. And if you really focus on those, build your own brand instead of buying into everybody else's brand is something that DeMartini says, right? Focus on your own brand, your own family, and stop giving money to all the other big brands out there. and then you'll do well, whether that's investing to grow your finances, going to training courses to grow your knowledge, investing in your health to make sure that your body and mind are nice and robust. All these things to me are far more important than buying into to brands and things. And I think we have that consumerism society. I think more of us want to focus on ourselves and our immediate environment and making sure that we're sorted in those regards. And as we've said, all the tools are there. It's not pleasant to do a stool sample like you and I did to find out what was going on in our digestive system, but it's not difficult at the same time. You just get the test kit, you do the sample, you send it to the lab. You can do urine tests, you can do hair tests, you can do all sorts of different samples at home with no embarrassing visits to the clinic and things like that. And the results just come back to you a couple of weeks later, and you can get to work on dealing with all of those things. It's not difficult to do at all. I just hope more and more people, understand how beneficial that mode of investigation is. Collect data about yourself, learn about yourself. This is what's going on. Here's what we need to do to go and fix it. Let's get to work, take the necessary action steps over time, one by one, not overwhelming people, not overloading. Here's the priority. Let's do this first. And when that's done, let's do this. And with the space of a few weeks or a few months, you may have changed 15, 20 things in your daily routine. And by then you just go, my God, did I really feel that bad 3 months ago or 6 months ago? I didn't even realize it was possible to feel this good. I think what I'd like to do is also share another difference in the model of and psychology of health and illness is in the medical system, it's very black and white. You're either well or you're ill. You're either healthy or you have a disease or a condition, and they label you with a certain condition. It's a very black and white way of thinking. I like to use a scale, which are called the vitality scale, where 0 is dead, 10 is pretty much as good as you could get, really great wellness and health in body and mind in all areas of your life, not just in yourself, but with your relationships and things as well. About 1 to 4, you've probably got some kind of pretty nasty or reasonably problematic medical disease. The lower down the scale you go, the more you're looking at things like maybe Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or cancer or bad heart disease and things like that. Most of the people who come to see us don't have any label from the medical system. They may do now and again, but most of the time, there's a whole bunch of symptoms going on in different areas of their body. So digestion, energy, mood, skin, sleep, sex drive, things like that. And they're all clustered around in a really confusing pattern where there doesn't seem to be any relationship between them. Well, why do I get a headache and digestive problems? Why do I feel anxious and have a skin condition? All of these little things. They're usually about a 5 or a 5.5, maybe a 6 on the vitality scale. They don't have a disease, but they definitely don't feel well. They're the people who we tend to attract a lot into our work, because they're the people who get abandoned by the medical system. There's nothing we can do. We've run our lab, we've run our scan, and we've run our blood test, and we can't find anything wrong with you. That's very condescending. It's all in your head. You're under stress. Are you sure you've got there's not, it's not the doctor's fault because they're not trained to deal with those kind of clusters of symptoms in lots of different areas of the body. So they just send you home, and your belief then is, oh, well, this must just be normal. The doctor's the authority, and the doctor says, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing I can do. So you just battle on in that stoic way and feel terrible, when in actual fact, all they're doing is really working in one paradigm, one model. The other paradigm is there's a whole bunch of things we can actually find out about you that the medical system is not really interested in, because they can't do this in an 8 to 10 minute appointment. You need to spend time with somebody, form a partnership with them over an extended period of weeks or months to hold your hand and pull you through all the different steps that need to be taken to get you to where you want to be. And all the technology and tools available to do that. But it's unrealistic to expect the medical system to do that, because a doctor has to see a quota of patients every day. You only even get half an hour with a consultant. So it's, that's the paradigm. You've got to admire the paradigm for what it is, and the fact that it's amazing for helping people who have acute problems in health, accidents, heart attacks, really serious infections, things like that. But it's never going to help you, that system, never ever going to help you restore optimal health. It's a disease control system, and an acute care system, emergency system, if you want to get your health to where you want it to be, you've got to take responsibility for yourself, as hard as that might be. And it is hard for a lot of people, including you and I, right? So we've both been there. So we understand the dynamics behind it. But if you don't take that responsibility, nobody's going to come and rescue you. And you may find yourself sliding even further down that vitality scale over the years to a point where it's going to cost even more and be even more difficult to reverse it again.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree 100%. So yeah, Dave, I'm mindful that we've come to the end. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I would just like to encourage people that nobody has to put up with feeling unwell, right? You can reverse it. It is difficult sometimes. It's not always easy. The process is, I'd like to say the process is simple, but not easy. You find out what's going on and you deal with it. Sounds really easy, but sometimes the practical steps are not quite so simple because of all the dynamics that we've been discussing. What I would encourage people to do is find practitioners to partner with who are going to listen to them and understand them as whole human beings and not just try to divide them up into, a digestive system or a mind or a spine or whatever it might be. Form a team, get people who listen to you and understand, who've ideally been through some of their own health challenges because they can empathize then. And, the sky's the limit with it. There's you wherever your energy is, your mood, your digestion, whatever it might be, you can overcome those symptoms. And even if you're listening to this with a medically labeled or diagnosed disease, you may still be able to turn that round as well. We've turned arthritis round, we've turned high blood pressure round, we've turned diabetes round, we've turned multiple sclerosis round. Some of the multiple sclerosis cases that I've come across and seen are just unbelievable. A very advanced, significant disease just disappears sometimes in a week or two in people when patterns are changed. You're a pattern at the moment, a pattern of mind and thinking and a pattern of metabolism. And you can change those patterns very rapidly in some cases over an extended period of time in other cases. And so that's what our work, both you and I, in different ways, try to help our clients change their patterns, whatever they may be. So if anybody would like any help, then we're at highermindedhealth.com. It's just a one-page website at the moment, but it will be developing. If you leave your email address, we'll keep you up to date with all the new products and services. But if you'd like some help now, email us at info@davehompes.com or see www.davehompes.com.
And I really vouch for Dave's work, having been through it myself. I don't really promote other people that I've never experienced, but I can definitely vouch for Dave's work and the enormous difference that it's made to my life, and obviously that for my sons. So thank you, Dave. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure, Marina. Great. And if we have time, we could do another chat, which is more detail on COVID-19, because I think
we have to wait until you get the research because he's a bit of a research buff. So stay tuned for the next episode of me and Dave, at which point he'll have hatched a plan and he'll have all the research and data because he loves that.
Let's give it a month or 6 weeks and then we'll be able to know, perfect. In retrospect, what's actually gone on during these last 3 months.
Can't wait, actually. I'm super excited. Get somebody else to do the work and just tell me. That's why.
Lovely stuff.
Thank you, everybody. And until the next time, bye-bye for now.
And there we have it, another beautiful episode of The Joy of Being. Now, if you got something from this and you know of somebody that could really, really do with a boost of positivity and joy, then please do share the episode with them. It's amazing the ripple effect that these episodes can have on others. Failing that, if you'd like to join a different conversation around what's going on in these uncertain times, then please do join the Facebook group, The Breathing Space for Hardworking Mamas. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/The Breathing Space for Mums in Business.